All right, let's get going. So, before I introduce our wonderful panel today, hello and welcome. I'm your host. I'm Stephanie. Right now, I'm at Google and I lead the payments team for APEC. If you're in Singapore, my claim to fame is Hot Pulse. If you're in India, I worked on some of the really fun. My team as well. Sorry, not just me. We worked on some of the really fun Diwali campaigns that you might have seen. Yeah, and someone on the panel asked me this week whether I've ever hosted a panel before, and I have not. So just like my UX writing career, we're going to figure things out on the way. All right. But yeah, hello and welcome. Very excited to be here. Quick note, UX Evenings at Google, if this is your first one, it's an external speaker series. We've also got an internal speaker today from Google, focused on UX thought leadership and innovation in APEC. Just really excited to have this forum here in this region and have so many wonderful people here with us. All right, so our topic today is not fun GIFs, it's content design, cultural relevance in the age of AI. So we'll be talking about all these things, and also just especially given the fact that we're here in APEC, we've got some wonderful speakers who work in the region, who work on products in the region, just touching a little bit more on our work here too. Before we get to that, for those who are not familiar with UX writing, content strategy, content design, so many different names, what exactly is it? Just quick TLDR, you're probably going to hear a lot more about this. A UX writer's role, it's not just to write the strings that go into that final product design. The actual copy is a very small part of what we do. I like to think of it when people ask me what exactly UX writing is. I like to say that a lot of what we do is probably very similar to what UX designers do. I think we're there throughout the entire design lifecycle with them. But there are probably a couple of things that we do that others might not. We think a lot about voice and tone, how something sounds, whether we're writing with empathy, whether we're being a bit more excited, whether we're writing an error message where we've done something wrong and maybe need to be, write things a little differently there. So there are different things we think about throughout the journey, alongside all the other stuff we do with design. This is a lot of copy, but copy always goes with design and personality. It's just a little bit more fun when it comes to what we do. We do a lot of strategy. I think writing, and I like to think about this as it's not just unique to UX writing, right? Like whether you're doing journalism or any other type of writing, there's a lot of strategy and a lot of thought that goes into your final copy. And it's the same with UX writing. We think a lot about the words we choose, like what exactly we're going to write about, how we're going to write about it. We spend a lot of time with other folks. It's the thing I enjoy most as a UX writer is the fact that UX writing does not happen in isolation. We work with folks like legal. Being on a team with other content writers is just really nice to be able to jam with other writers as well to make sure we're being consistent. It's just really nice to have a second pair of eyes sometimes on things I do. Always fun to work with our favorite design partners, and we've got more questions on partnerships later on. As content writers, there's a little bit of a difference between what we do and what marketing does, but we do work very closely. Food is also a very important part of the day-to-day process of many UX writers. And we go for a lot of crits and reviews. I love the fact that we often go hand in hand with the design, like what is UX without the copy. Day-to-day chats, emails, bugs, P0 syncs. We work very closely with our product managers and engineers. I think even little things like metadata, for example, right? Like choosing the words we use, like, is it something that an engineer can implement? Like, these are all little conversations that happen throughout the day, just figuring out what we can and cannot do. And yeah, more folks we work with, research is so important to us. I think, like, just why do we write the things we do? What motivates people? Why would someone use something? Like, where do we see the breaks in what we write? Being in APEC especially, I think, like, for a lot of our markets, we see that art is so complementary to the copy we write, and we work a lot with our illustrators, our fantastic art team, to figure out how these things go hand in hand. And of course, like, for me personally, I work in payments, so risk and support has just been such a rich source of insights for writing. So I think that the thing I enjoy most about UX writing, I think, like, UX as a whole feels like it's a really complex space, but there's so many things we do that just kind of like not, things we do everywhere else as well, that are just kind of like here in the UX space. All right. So that was a little bit about UX writing and what we do on a day-to-day basis. Other than me, we've got three very, very fantastic speakers here, and I would like them to introduce themselves in their own words. We've got Anna.
Hi, thank you so much, Stephanie. Anna here. I'm based in China, and I've been living in China for the last 11 years. English is my second language, as you've probably figured out by now. First being Russian, and third being Chinese. Woohoo, I use it a lot at work, actually. So before joining AliExpress and before becoming a team leader here, I actually worked a lot in journalism, marketing, and also localization. And I actually took my passion for localization with me when I came here originally as a localization specialist and then as a content designer and content design lead. So I talk about localization a lot, and I love talking about localization. I spoke about localization during Button Conference in 2020. Super happy to have this opportunity. Thanks to Christina Halvorsen. And if you love talking about localization as well, feel free to leave me a message. And also, if you're watching us right now, feel free to share if you in questions or comments if you also localization background. From localization and content design, I also got to work with many people from different countries. At some point, I managed people from 13 countries, so it got me a good head start in cross-cultural communication, which is something I teach right now and something that I'm super excited about. I'm also super excited about writing. If you scan QR code on my site, you can find my article on the status of content design. And also, you can find some ways to contact me. So if you want to talk about cross-cultural communication, if you want to talk about working in Asia, if you want to talk about how content design works together with localization, feel free to reach out to me, and we can talk.
Thank you so much, Anna. And that reminds me, if you would like to share this event, you can hashtag us, tag us with hashtag UX Evening, no S. All right. We've also got Jane with us here today.
Hey everyone, I'm Jane. I'm based in Singapore. I currently lead the global content design team at TikTok, supporting the core consumer app. A bit about myself, I think I need to explain the images I chose here. Standing in front of a live volcano is a core memory of mine. This was in Ethiopia. It's just a reminder that there's so much out there that we don't know about, and just to stay open to new experiences and sometimes scary experiences. And on the bottom left, I love that I had the opportunity to begin my career in a startup, in a local startup. That's where I learned how to build teams, be adaptable, have fun, and dare to try things even though I didn't know what I was doing. And speaking of teams, I love team sports. Used to play basketball for Singapore. And every day at work is a team sport, right? We go in and we, fight as a team. So especially in UX, we don't do things alone, right? And in content design, we don't work alone at all. And the quote I chose is clarity is kindness. And I think this applies to all our relationships, both in and out of work, especially with our stakeholders and our teammates. When we're clear with our expectations, everyone has an easier time. And similarly for our users, right? If we write clearly, they understand how to use our products and enjoy themselves. yeah, that's a bit about me. Very excited to be here and chat with all of you amazing leaders in the space. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Jane. Also, fun fact, I sort of slid into Jane's DMs and made friends with her, just looking for like other content leads here in Singapore. Last but not least, we've got Stacy.
Hey, everybody. I'm Stacy Gordon. I am not in APEC. I am based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I work for Google. I've been at Google about 4.5 years, and I currently lead the content design and strategy team for Google Search's new generative AI experience, which is live in some countries, but not all countries yet. And before Google, I spent 4 years at Facebook, and before that, I had my own content agency for several years. So some of the things that we're looking at here are artifacts from my past life, working in community integrity at Facebook, as well as working for a very large jewelry chain, doing a lot of like thought leadership and content marketing strategy. The bottom picture is my old team at Google, word nerds. We were a pretty large content strategy team. Yeah, I started my career as a journalist. So I actually got out of school working in magazine journalism and very quickly learned how to write HTML and build websites. And that's why I'm working in digital content strategy and content design today.
All right. Thank you all so much. And now we move on to the fun part. So we're going to ask, so just a little bit of TLDR on what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to start with a rapid fire round. We're going to go into sort of the panel section and talk a little bit about UX and UX writing in APEC, sort of cultural relevance, a little bit about AI. And at the end, we'll also just, throughout the session as well, like, please feel free to leave questions in the chat and we'll get to them. We'll spend the last 10 minutes or so of today answering some of the questions you have. And yeah, feel free to direct them to any of the speakers specifically or all if you want to. All right, so let's start with the rapid fire round. What was your first job? Anna.
Commissioning editor on the radio station.
Jane.
Selling MacBooks and iPods during the holidays.
Stacy.
My very first job was a paper carrier for my hometown, but my first professional job was as a trade journalist covering the jewelry and the global jewelry industry.
Nice. My first job was writing those deals that you see in the Group 1 site. All right, next question. What was your last job before breaking into content design?
Journalist. I was writing articles about Chinese contemporary art.
I was a community manager.
I owned my own company, as I mentioned earlier. I'm doing a lot of like website content strategy and brand and marketing stuff before moving into UX.
A lot of writing backgrounds as well. All right. What is content design to you?
It's a design specialization that focuses on the written aspects of UX.
I think it's about clarity and connection with users.
I think about it as like how information and messaging drive the user journey.
Nice. Favorite thing about being in content design?
Working with people and meeting different people.
Yeah, collaboration for sure.
Definitely working with lots of different kinds of people, but especially working with other writers. That's my favorite part.
I love that. I love that UX writing, you don't work in isolation. Biggest learning as a content designer this year?
AI is not taking my job.
Speak up, like really often.
My biggest learning this year is that even when the product is content, we still need to convince other people to include content designers in product and design discussions.
Yes. Sad but true. Okay, biggest pet peeve as a content designer.
Conversations about getting a seat at the table.
Fill in the blanks on the screen. The design is final, no changes.
I'm going to repeat my previous answer. When the product is content, we still need to convince people to include us.
All right. Most important quality you look for in a content designer as a manager.
Advanced common sense.
100% agree. And also asking really good questions to poke holes.
I think ability to collaborate with others.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Last two. What are you most excited for in content design in 2024?
Building content community in China.
I would say similar in Singapore. High fives.
Nice.
I think it's like the increase in awareness around how important our role is and the emergence of AI and making AI successful.
Nice. And last but not least, should we be afraid of AI? Why not?
It's an ultimate form of collaboration. Nothing to be afraid of.
I think I see it as like an assistant, makes us more efficient. So not afraid yet.
I would say absolutely not. Like it's change, it's happening. We shouldn't be afraid of it, but we should be respectful of it and careful with it.
All right. Thank you so much for indulging me. We're going to go into the real questions now. But yeah, I just wanted to start off by just saying that, just acknowledging the fact that it has been a pretty tough year for tech, for UX, for content design. I know for me at least, I was really excited last year when I was seeing so many content design roles here in Singapore. There was definitely, noticeable dip this year, but things are definitely picking up again. Something that I just was really interested in knowing asking you all was, what advice would you give someone who's trying to break into content design today? And how, if there's any difference, how would that advice be different from when you first started breaking out? Anna.
I would say there are three things that I think are extremely important. First one is you should really read everything that you can get your hands on. When I just started, there was only a January-ish book, Letting Go of the Words. That was the book that got me my first job in content. But now you have so much to read, so much to learn. Great books by Tori Podmajersky, by Sarah Winters, by Scott Kuby. There's so much to discover. So read everything you can get your hands on. And number two, take everything you like. Because as you learn new methodologies, as you learn new ways to write content and implement it in your product, feel free to borrow from all those books, all those sources. It's there for you to learn. It's there for you to be implemented, right? And number three, something that wasn't really required when I started is to have a good writing portfolio. And again, there are great sources for that as well. There are articles about what you can put in your portfolio, but most important is about showcasing your thought process and showcase how do you really analyze the challenges and problems that users facing, tie it back to business problems, and come up with content that can help address both of those. So yeah, that would be those three things: read everything, take everything you like, and make a good portfolio.
Yeah, I love that advice about the portfolio. I think I realized as a manager as well that when I first started out, I probably didn't have the strongest portfolio. I don't think that was something I paid a lot of attention to, but it's definitely something that I keep an eye out for now. It's almost a must sometimes, a must. What about you, Jane?
I think that, definitely +1 to everything Anna said, but one more thing is really pay attention to content design. I think people don't even realize what content design is, and it's so hard to explain because it's invisible. if it's done well. And it doesn't mean that there's only one way to approach content design. So whatever you see all our different like major apps doing, right? It doesn't mean that's the only way to solve a problem or the only approach to content design. You can actually create like 10 different iterations on both the design and the content, the whole approach, right? And I feel like whether or not you have experience in it, whether you have read the books or not, you can do that at any given time. Look at entire user journeys. Like if you're interested in UX, you should be paying attention to these flows. And you can easily screenshot them, redesign the flow yourself, even if it's just a sketch, and actually work through iterations of content. I think that would actually show people, no matter what background you're from, you can think, you can approach problems in different ways. And there's never one perfect or like correct answer for content design.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like when I first started out as well, so focused on sort of the right way to do UX writing, right? Like the right way to do UX design. You have that sort of like double diamond thing. And my biggest learning, at least like 4 years in at Google and like 5 years in with UX writing, is that it's just so not linear in this space. Yeah. What about you, Stacey?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to echo a lot of what Anna and Jane said. I feel like, for someone who's just starting out, it's about getting as much experience as you can and being willing to, no matter how much experience you've had with other kinds of writing, I feel like approaching it with a beginner's mindset, because it is really different. And I kind of came into it after being a consultant for many years, where I would sort of write something and then it would be like, this is what we're doing. And suddenly I was doing, 20 versions of one string and getting lots and lots of feedback from lots of people and kind of going, what is happening? But that's what you have to do. So, I mean, I think it's just like coming in, being humble, being open, very open to feedback, understanding that lots of people are going to have opinions on your content, and that you have to have a thick skin and understand where people are coming from. And I think just like asking lots of questions and being willing to learn from people who have been doing it longer than you have.
Yeah, I love the thing about journalism. I know like someone on my team recently, so when they were sort of like trying to figure out how to approach a problem, they were like, well, I did this as a journalist. I asked myself all these questions. Why don't I just do this here as well, right? Like it is just writing, it is strategy. I know like so much great advice, but Anna, Jane, also just wondering if your advice is different for someone here working in APEC. Like I've worked on products in the US, I've worked on products here, and so many things different in the way we work, the way we approach things. What do you think?
I think maybe one of the most obvious things I would say is it seems like we have less standardization here. In at least here in China, I can only speak for China, as that's where I'm based. But it seems to me that we have less of a standard when it comes to tools. For example, if a company overseas is looking for a content designer, they would be like, hey, we work in Jira, we use Figma, we use Writer. Our translation team works in Relocalize. So they have a lot of specific tools that they expect you to master before you join, right? While here in China, it seems like companies are more interested in creating their own tools and their own processes. So, for example, you can go from one IT company to another, and you realize that they're actually all creating their content and their designs in different spaces. Maybe they even have their own tools. So it definitely requires an ability to quickly learn and understand the principle behind something, rather than which button you click where. So that would be one aspect that is different. Second aspect is I think the production speed is very different. At least here in China, we ship fast, and I mean really fast. In my experience, the shortest period between having an idea for a page and launching it online in 7 languages was 8 hours. That includes design and writing and content design. So imagine that kind of speed. You need to be very flexible. You need to be very fast learner. You need to quickly get maybe not always what people are asking of you, but what people actually want. What they say and what they want might be a different thing. They might want you to write certain string, but what they actually want is they want to address a specific problem. And maybe when you know the problem, it would be better for you to come up with actual working solution that would help them further. So I would say be mindful of different tools and be mindful of different speed. And you will need to learn fast if you want to work here.
Yeah, I think like on that note, and something that, I'm also just interested in, because the speed thing is definitely a factor here. Like, how do you make sure that things are still written well? How do you make sure that quality is still a factor, right? When you have to move so fast. What do you think, Jane?
I think you just gotta ship first and iterate later. What choice do you have, right? You do your best, you get it seen by as many people as you can, you make your best efforts at it, and sometimes we can't convince our partners on some things that we want to do and say. So be it. We can spend the time to test it live. We can spend the time to do user testing on our own, within the week. We can come back with data. We can still change things, right? I think that's the beauty of working in tech, and being very flexible, I think, is also part of the culture in APEC. I think that's also another interesting thing. Like, you just move fast, but you also change things fast. And I think it allows for us to work in a pretty agile way, although it's pretty frantic at times. It's also a very fun way to learn, to just ship quickly and learn live.
Yeah. Stacey, any fun observations from working with some folks in APEC here?
Honestly, I don't think I have anything to add that Anna and Jane haven't already said. The shipping fast thing is actually something I hadn't heard before, so that was a learning for me.
Wild. But yeah, I think like just on that note, something we chatted about a little earlier as well was just here in APEC, I think Singapore, Shanghai also, like, we collaborate with such multicultural teams. I know that's also true for other places, but something we work with here, right? And it's for myself, like, I work with folks in India, I work with folks in China, I work with folks in so many different places. And it's also just sort of like navigating different people work so differently. We're working in this space where we have to review things, we have to move things faster. So, and like, I think I was talking about the fact that the hardest thing for me to review was this project I was working on with the US team, where I kept getting feedback that this looked interesting. And I only realized pretty late on that this meant this is not great. So yeah, like, any interesting insights on how we work here with multicultural folks? Like, how have you navigated things?
Well, I think there are different levels of that communication, right? First level, I would say, from the content perspective, it's a team level, right? Because if you have people from different cultures working together, then you quickly realize that, yes, for somebody, if something is interesting, it literally means that it's interesting. For somebody, being interesting means being not quite fit for this project, or not quite meeting the brief, right? So on the team level, as leaders, I think it's extremely important to align everybody on the same standard. Yes, maybe at home you do things a little bit differently, but here as a team, we do things a certain way so that we can communicate more effectively with each other. For example, if you call a meeting with a Chinese product, it's very likely that they're going to be late because they got carried away from their previous meeting, right? And the more important thing is to reach the conclusion, not to stay on time. So you need to be mindful that some people might be upset if somebody's late. But if we set it as a team standard, we say, okay, guys, here we are not late. As a team, we're doing these things. As a team, we follow this code of communication. That helped me tremendously. And at some point, I managed people from 13 different countries. I think without that, it would be very hard for me to align to everybody's differences. So that's what we can do on the team level. On individual level, I think we need to be mindful. First of all, we need to be mindful about the cultural templates and the behaviors that we were raised with. And the first step is to understand that you have those, right? If you are a Chinese designer designing a birthday card for your customers, and you want to put even number of flowers on the card, it's perfectly fine. It would be acceptable here. But if you show this card to people in Slavic countries, that would be very offensive and rude, because that's an unlucky funeral number. You use this number of flowers for funerals in those countries. So you never know those things unless you pay attention. It's actually a lot of mental work to be aware of your biases and constantly ask yourself, hey, this way of doing things, this way of approaching this problem, is that something that is general, or is it something that is specific to my culture? So as a team, set unified rules. As an individual, be mindful and do your best to recognize your own behavior patterns and do your best to learn about other cultures.
Nice. That's actually a great segue into my next question. I love the topic about flowers there, but what's unique about writing for an audience in APEC? And, APEC is so huge, right? Like Asia is so huge. There's Singapore, there's Japan, there's so many different countries. But what stood out to you, just, from writing for a more traditional audience in the West versus like what we have here? Stacy, you've been writing for a lot of different markets.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is, something that it's interesting. Like I worked for, there's that word again, interesting. I worked for Facebook for 4 years and worked in internationalization as one of the things I covered. And, we took a very US-centric approach to, we wrote it in US English and we translated it for the rest of the world. And we're really trying to not do that for the product that I'm working on now. We're really trying to think about, how do we make this more culturally relevant, more local feeling, more appropriate in terms of tone of voice for every country and culture that we're launching in. And the content we're working on is actually generated by AI and a large language model. So it can probably handle translation really well, but like, what is the actual content strategy for these new countries, for these languages, for these cultures? I was in India and Japan with a UX researcher in August to really dig into like, what do people prefer with this content? And how did they prefer that it sounded? Did they want it to feel, concise and short? Did they want it to be more comprehensive? We learned a lot about the words we were using and how local it needed to be for people to really feel like they could trust it. Like they didn't want to think that somebody from the US had written this content for like an Indian audience in Hindi. And so like everything about the formality of the content and the tone that we're using and the words that we're using, we have to question. And so it is so different than how we think about it in the US. An example was like we tested a piece of content about training a dog. And in Japan, we were using words in it like command, giving the dog commands. And that word really rubbed people the wrong way. They were like, we would never use this word. It makes it feel so cold and severe. They wanted warmth and they wanted it to be, they said, we have to focus more on the dog, like make it dog centric. So it was like a really big wake up call for us. So we're really trying to use these kinds of learnings and do more research in all of the countries we're launching in to really think about the content approach for each audience.
What about you, Jane? What's been unique for you?
I think it's been really interesting because we do write in US English, right? And you translate to 75 languages. Like, how in the world do you ensure that you're speaking in a culturally relevant way? You can't, not as a single writer, right? You can't do that. And a lot of the time we have to rely on, obviously, our translation partners and the amount and the quality of context that we provide when we submit our strings, right? What are the right things what is the right information and strategy that we want to share with them so that they can create the right words out of it? I don't know. It's going to be so different, 75 different ways. It's like, how do you even begin to break that down, right? And I think we have to really rely on our collaboration with localization teams as well as ops partners, other people. Just rely on them to tell you whether some things resonate or not with certain markets. And sometimes that's just reaching out to whoever you know within the company who might be residing somewhere else just to get a gut check, right? But that's also not sustainable. So I think it's a very interesting problem, I guess, or an opportunity as well. And I wonder how, as a discipline, as we get more seen as, important, that, the words are the ultimate thing getting communicated to the user, how can we then build more support for localized content or internationalization? I think it's been seen as like an operational function for so long, but it's not. It's a cultural function, right? It's a branding thing. It's all communications. So maybe that's something that we can also talk about more in the future, right? How do we be relevant for every single market and in a smarter and more sustainable way?
Yeah, like I also just like fun note, I love that both of you started by saying that's very interesting. So maybe not a US centric thing. But yeah, like completely like I think like when you're talking about just sort of that cultural resonance, right? I think with my team, we were just talking yesterday about the fact that we had this phrase. I saw this phrase on someone's copy where it said, give a missed call on this number. And I was like, what is this phrase? Like, is this even correct? And we looked up all these like websites, and it is a phrase that's like very common in India. So that was just so interesting to me to learn as well. Like there's so many, like it's English, right? It's English, and we all like so many places where we speak English, and yet even in English there's so many different phrases that are just so unique to each region. But when I was talking to the writer as well, she was like, well, like it didn't even occur to me that this was not something that other people were not familiar with, because it's so common here. So I love that. I love the fact that like language is so personal, like how all these little cultural things like they stand out to people. I think people do notice, like people might not miss it when it's not there, but it does feel like it makes a difference when it is.
Yeah, Steph, just to add, we had a similar situation with missed call, with text message and SMS. And they were like, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm sure it's different everywhere. We have to ask, right?
Yeah, oh my God, yes. I've also had that SMS conversation. And I know you were talking about writing for so many different languages and also managing a team with folks who work on like these different languages. How have you approached this?
Well, I think ultimately the best translation is no translation. And it's actually not just my idea. It was proven by data. I think there was a talk during World, if I'm not mistaken, called Goodbye Source Text. So the person behind this talk, Giulia Tardidi, what she did was she did experiment, and she created one page with English source and sent English to translators. And then for the second page, she sent a brief to multi-language writers and asked them to create their own page. And then she took those pages and did an A/B test. And what do you know? The pages written by native speakers with a brief performed significantly better than those translated, because it took in consideration all those points that you were just discussing, using the right vocabulary, using the right page structure, using the right arguments to convince people. Because, for example, different selling points might be attractive to different people, right? And you can see that in data as well. So for me, what worked the best was really showing people, hey, this is the result that we're getting with this process, and this is the result that we're getting with embedded multilingual content strategies. You can opt for translation. You can opt for content strategies. Of course, it's your choice as business, but what we can do is we can show the data.
Yeah, I love that. And like final question on the cultural note, and anyone feel free to chime in. What advice would you give someone who's writing for a culture that's not theirs?
Do lots of research. Talk to users.
Be mindful of the differences. Don't use jargon. Don't use abbreviations. Don't use local references. Have a good document for your team about how to write for localization. That is a good start, I think.
Yeah, start with clarity, take away personality just as a starting point.
Yeah.
that can come in illustrations, in other forms, right? Let's keep the writing clear.
Absolutely.
All right. Moving on to something that some folks might be interested in. So AI, still so new, still so exciting. I'm not sure when we first start hearing about AI. Feels like it's been a long time. Question for folks here: what are you excited about AI-wise right now? And whatever you're excited about, has that changed from when AI first came into the first emerged? Jane.
I think it hasn't really changed. I've been kind of just like curious about where it's going, both on just like a personal front, right? And as also professionally, how does that impact? Not so much like whether it's going to take our jobs, but how do we use it really efficiently? And another layer as well is how do we actually create features and products that are really fun and exciting things that help people express their creativity. I think that's one thing that I've really liked seeing from AI so far. Like it has enabled so many people to create things just from writing prompts. I mean, how cool is that? Like instead of organizing a photo shoot for a product, you can literally just write some words and get it done. It saves a whole bunch of cost and manpower and energy, but you can play. And I think that creativity and self-expression is just something that is really advanced and has taken away a lot of the hardship behind creating cool things.
Yeah, I'll have to admit when I first started using these tools, I was probably using it as a really high-tech version of Grammarly. But yeah, I feel like it's really helped with a lot of summaries and stuff. Anna, what do you think?
Yeah, I think first of all, I second everything that you guys said. Definitely helpful in summarizing research. Definitely helpful create things faster and in a more efficient manner. Also, I'm excited about all the opportunities for personalization. Because you know how in traditional marketing, for example, you have very generic message addressed to everybody. Now we actually have means to make this message more diversified and make this message more appealing to the particular audience. And we can talk to people about what they care about, right? And it won't cost us a fortune anymore because costs are going down. And it's quite exciting. I think there's going to be definitely a new level of personalization in the whole IT industry, and then definitely in production moving on. As we develop personalized content, people will also seek more personalized experience, and I'm excited.
Yeah, like not so much about content, but like all those that yearbook photo AI thing that everyone was doing recently was fun. Yeah. Stacy, I know you're in this space, but also just as a content designer, what are you excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about AI, like just kind of backing up from the content piece of it for a minute. Like I'm actually excited just about all of the possibilities. Like AI is so powerful, and my husband works in for a drug development company, and like just thinking about the power that AI could bring to like drug discovery and medical research, and oh my gosh, so many things. Like we might finally cure cancer. But like kind of then zoning back into our world, like I'm just excited about, I feel like it's not just gonna be about serving up information and creation, but I think it's gonna actually become like a really valuable tool to help people like plan and just carry out their lives in a richer and more efficient way. And I think we haven't even like tapped into what those opportunities are yet. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, like just the landscape's going to change a lot. I think we're not. Maybe it's not going to replace us, but I think like things are going to evolve, right? Like our roles are going to evolve. Like what we do on a day-to-day basis is going to evolve. What do you think are skills that, us content designers should be thinking about, should be developing as, the landscape changes with AI? And maybe
Well, definitely, we need to further develop our strategic approach to what we're doing, because if AI can solve the question of how do we generate content, how do we create content, we still have unanswered questions of what do we write and where it will create the most impact. AI is as good as 1,000 interns. You give them very specific tasks and they do it in a very precise manner. But somebody still needs to decide what are we doing and where, so that we can give execution to AI, right? So definitely more strategic thinking. We need to understand clearly what the whole flow is, how it affects users, what are some pain points, what are the most important things to be said here. So definitely need to step up and take more strategic approach. And secondly, we still need to be there when it comes to finding user experience problems and advocating for solutions. Ultimately, when you try to take the user experience to a new level through the means of content or through the means of design, you still need to talk to people, right? We need to further develop our human traits. When we have more time to investigate, when we have more time to come up with solutions that can be executed by AI. Ironically, we need to be more human. We need to learn to work with other humans better in order to have those decisions improved, refined in teamwork and implemented. Also, maybe third area is standards. How do we define what is good AI-generated content? There are still some risks there, right? There are some risks such as answers not being very accurate to prompt. There are localization issues sometimes. I noticed a few papers and articles being published on how languages that are not English are largely underperform English when it comes to quality, consistency, grammar, accuracy. So we would also need to become the trendsetters, and I think the holders of the rules, right? What do we define as good content? How do we define quality? And how do we have a good balance between the cost-effective content creation and content quality?
I love that. I feel like my takeaway for today is basically be human, be local. Jane, any advice?
Yeah, I think just to echo what Anna said, I think empathy is something we should double down on, right? Like we're already probably the most empathetic discipline of the lot, but I think all the more we need to double down on that and poke holes in a lot of the strategy and all the feature requirements that, really come from a human perspective. Like, what do people feel when they go through this flow? Where have they come from? Where are they going? What are they feeling at every step? I don't think that's something that changes with AI. In fact, it just, as Anna mentioned, like we have to do that even more and be advocates for the user in that way. And I think in terms of standards, another thing that I think about is how do we help the general audience understand better what is human created and AI created out there? How do we as content designers take on that responsibility of labeling content in a very easy to understand way? How do we help people understand when they're in a AI generation flow that relies on AI, right? And all these nuances of creation now involve an extra layer of distinction. And I feel like we haven't yet as a community really come to a conclusion on how to label things, do we use the word generate or do we use the word create? Do we want to be that specific? I think we should, but these are the things that we have to consider with every new feature that we see out there. We have to pay attention to what's happening and call out any risk that we see. I think one of the big things that we do, as always, is calling out risks for our product teams. So I think that part is more enhanced than ever with AI.
Is it Cassandra who's the one who does this? Never mind. Stacy, what advice do you have?
I mean, I was just about to say exactly what Jane just said. So I think I'll just plus one. I think if you're working in tech right now, there are probably what they used to say at Google, like a million flowers blooming all around you when it comes to AI. Like I'm sure you are dealing with a lot of AI projects in your worlds, and it is time for content design to have a voice in this work. Like they kind of can't do it without us. Like this work is content, and we need to be involved in designing what that experience looks like, feels like. But it's new, it's nascent. Like a lot of people are just learning about it, just developing a point of view. It's one of the most exciting things about being in this space right now, is that like I kind of feel like we're all figuring it out together. But we need a voice, and we need to like use our instincts and our experience to speak up and stand up for like being responsible, for being clear with users about where this content's coming from, for being factually accurate, and then for being human, because I think that's one of the most important things about it.
Thank you all so much. So much great advice. We've got 8 minutes left, and we'll still keep the live stream open for a little bit in case we go over. I'm going to take some questions from folks in the audience. I love that this first question was something that was on the list of panel questions that we just didn't have time to get to. When in the design process should you include UX writers? I've included, so this is from Justina. Her question is, when do you include UX writers in the design process? I've included them from the beginning, but some designs change so much by the end of the sprint that the content they provided early on was outdated. Anyone who would like to take this one?
Me, I think that's exactly the point. Because it can change so much, all the more we need to be there, because we need to know why those changes are happening, right? Were there different business goals along the way? Did all of you go off and have a discussion without us about changes, and now we just have to plug in the content? No, we should be part of the process to advise how and where and when things should change. Should we provide a different set of content for different design approaches? We can do that. We'll be happy to do that, right? And if we look at it in totality, we can see what the whole user experience feels like with different content and design approaches. So I don't think it's like you finalize the design flow and you feel bad that UX writers have to change things. We're fine. We're good. We love to do it. We're all iterators, and we love collaborating with designers. Sometimes we might be too busy to go through too many changes, but we much rather do that than just be roped in at the end to plug in content.
Yeah, design changes, content changes, everything changes. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Ideally,
Yes,
we're part of that conversation. Ideally, as Jane mentioned, it's not like you're bringing us in at the beginning, having us write strings, and then we're out. Like, please think of us as your design partners. We are designers, but our toolkit is words. Like, we think about the whole user flow. We're thinking about the information journey. We're not just there to plug in holes. So please think of us as like we should be with you on that journey as the designs are changing. That way, it's not like we're just kind of, bungeeing in and bungeeing out. Like, we're actually along with you, and we know why the words are changing, and we're maybe thinking about it along the way with you.
Yeah, we're partners.
I love that we're begging and pleading with the audience, everyone who works in UX. Please.
We want to work with you. Okay, I've got a next question from Ian. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Is icon design and research on it part of the UX writing role?
Ooh, fantastic question. I think the answer is it depends. It depends on what your content team is in charge of, and what your content team is covering at the moment, and what kind of support can they provide. For example, if you have a multilingual content strategy team, if you have, people from Saudi Arabia, people from France, and people from Spain working on the same team, and you want to make sure that, hey, this icon can be perceived well, and communicate the intended meaning in all those countries. Yes, of course, it's a great idea to pull them in and ask them, hey, will this work for you guys? But if you're limited in the opportunities to get insights of the local markets, that can be significantly more time-consuming and a challenging thing to do. So I guess it depends on the capacity of your team. And again, I don't think there is any content team member who would be like, no, I'm not going to look into these icons for you ever. The question is, how much help can they provide, given their schedule and given how many projects usually one content designer supports. So I think definitely good idea to consult. Definitely good idea to consult, especially if you set up with multilingual content designers. But the question of how much input can content design provide, it really depends on the team and the organization.
Yeah, and I think like icons and copy just go hand in hand, right? Like I think there's so many markets where, especially where literacy levels are, the range of it, you have to make sure that these things go hand in hand and they work together because they're both complementary. Next question, also from Yan. How is the UX writing job changing with the rise of voice interfaces?
That's a good question.
I don't think it changes much. I think we just need to be a bit more cognizant of what the differences are with that flow versus written content, right? I can't speak from experience in that, but I can imagine that it'll be very similar thought process and similar applications of, our standards, but we probably have to reimagine, like close our eyes, right? Or something. We probably need to just really approach it differently, like viscerally, I don't know if that answers the question, but I think, yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I've spent a lot of time in this area, but I do think like tone is so important, right? Like even more so when you're actually hearing someone speak these words. It just matters a lot how you say things, especially when it comes to culture. Like there's a certain voice you think about when you think of a voice interface, and it's so interesting how that matters. All right. This was also a question that we didn't get to on the panel. If there isn't a team that focuses on content design, what would be the next best approach? This is from Mitch.
So, I mean, I think that if you have absolutely no content designers or UX writers, I think the best thing to do is, first of all, lobby to get one. This is your call to action here tonight. But also, I think designers can educate themselves about, the principles of UI writing. And UX writing. There are some really great books. There's a great book called Writing is Designing that I would highly, highly recommend. And I think that you can educate yourself on the principles of it. Please do that too. If you're writing interface content, it's important to understand principles around conciseness, around, being clear, around eliminating jargon, things like that. So definitely get some books and become your content design advocate.
Yeah, and to add on, I think designers are probably the most well-equipped to write. And I would say trust your instinct on what information should be presented to people and do it in the simplest way possible, but in the clearest way. If it means you have to sacrifice some conciseness, I always tell people to go for clarity first, right? If it takes you half a page, unfortunately, to explain to people what to do, it's better than not setting it up properly, right? And people not knowing what to do with the product. So just remember that clarity is key. And if you notice, if your product deals in a certain area like payments, make sure a certain terminology is very, very consistent. Don't say I don't know, I can't think of an example right now, but don't use like two different terms, in back-to-back screens and completely confuse people. Wait, did you mean that or that? And I think those are just the basic things to look out for so that people don't get confused. I think avoiding confusion should be your primary goal.
Yeah, I think those are fantastic tips. Get your content design foundations, influence others, guide people to create terminology, guide people to be consistent, and that's how style guides come together. You agree on these terms, you agree on the same writing principles. Eventually, you either get content strategy support or you manage to make it work for your organization while you're not capable or not able to get more at the moment.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just like research, data, product context as well. It's at the end of the day, you have to understand what you're writing to be able to write that. All right, we've got two more questions. We're over time, but we've got two more questions if folks want to stay on. For female leads working in a discipline that is usually left to the end of the process, with tech being male dominated, what are some of the challenges you faced as UX writing female leads? Any advice?
We were just talking about this at dinner tonight. I was sitting with 4 pretty experienced female content designers who have been doing this for a long time, and we were sharing our experiences of being the only women in the room. I think once when I was working at Facebook, I walked into a room with like about 25 people, and I was the only woman. It was the first time that had ever happened to me in my career, and it was really intimidating. My advice is just get a thick skin and don't let that intimidate you. Actually, so many of my male colleagues are they're so wonderful, collaborative. Every once in a while you run into someone who is not that way. but working in tech, I have actually found people, male and female, to be very lovely. So I would just say, make your voice heard, even if it's quiet and shaky at first. Like, use your voice and don't be intimidated.
I love that.
Yeah, I would say ask the stupid questions and be totally okay with that. Sometimes I find that, we think that if we ask something that is maybe a bit more technical that we're not familiar with, because we're content designers, right? But I realize that because we are sense makers and we do communicate, as efficiently as possible, if we don't understand something, there's a very high likelihood many people don't understand something. And that's one of the best pieces of advice that a previous manager told me. It's like, if you don't understand something in a strategy document or in a meeting, it's very likely a lot of people don't. And if you help everyone by asking the question and clarifying things, you're actually seen as like someone who knows their stuff, because you can poke holes in things. And it's not poking holes for the sake of it or being difficult in any way, but just wanting to bring clarity to the full picture. And I think the last thing I would say is that it's really nice that the content design community is so female-centric, so far from what I've seen. From 4 of us here, I think you can tell that is kind of the trend. And it is very empowering. I don't think of myself as a female leader in a male environment because so many of my fellow leaders are female, and it's really fun, and it's a nurturing place because we do bring that energy, right? We want collaboration to be smooth, and we want our users to feel comfortable. So I think it's perfect for us as female leaders.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
also, yeah.
It's such a great point that we have community. You're not alone with this problem, and I don't think it's possible for us to use the short time we have to give a full answer to this very complicated question. But I think one way to approach the answer is leverage the community, leverage the power of other women working in tech with you. Find friends, find buddies, share your challenges, share your solutions, share the tactics that work for you, that might work for somebody else, and make it a habit. Make it your source of support and help when the help is needed. And don't be shy. And I feel like most of the content leaders I ever worked with are very, very supportive and very willing to lend me a hand. if you face any challenge, and share their perspective.
Yeah, I do think like community and collaboration is so important in this field, especially. We've got one last question, and I think this is a great question to end on. I think it has always been a challenge to quantify content design efforts to demonstrate impact. What's your view? How has this changed? Has it become more challenging as we design with Gen I?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's hard. It's hard. I mean, I do feel like with sort of more traditional UX writing, we can at least tie, depending on what it is, we can usually tie a string to some results, and we can do A/B testing, and we have ways of quantifying and measuring the impact of content, and it becomes a little harder when the content is actually being generated by a machine. And we have done a lot of work to influence how that machine produces content, but we can't explicitly say that we wrote that content exactly that way, or that, and so, yes, it is becoming more difficult to sort of understand, like, what does that look like? We do a lot of internal quality measures that are meant to kind of reflect and stand in for user preferences, and how do we measure quality? And so we're doing a lot of work around that, and then trying to like really think about how do we use UX research to help with some of this, to understand if what we're doing is actually helping people and satisfying users.
Yeah, I would say that more important than ever is user sentiment, as they use these types of products. How do we measure that? I don't know. We'll see. Lots and lots of qualitative research with different types of markets, different types of users. How advanced are some users? How not advanced? It's a whole new area. I think that we have a lot to learn from. We don't even know how to quantify our own quality in that sense. So I think that's something to look forward to as well.
Yeah, I think the key idea here is again finding balance between what business is after at this particular stage, and how it addresses the needs of users, and how we can really find a way to measure our outcome as we see how it's related to the objectives of the business. I feel that's extremely important. We need to be looking into areas where, for example, when we talk about quality, we want to be talking about areas where quality really makes a difference, right? You don't want to work on quality polishing some edge case of a second tier floor, right? You want to increase quality where it matters. So regardless of what kind of tools we're using in our work, being that AI or being that more traditional tools, we still need to be aware of business priorities and focus areas, and should I say, what methods across the user flow, and make sure that we put our efforts in those areas that matter, and find ways to quantify, to measure our outcomes.
All right. Thank you all so much. We are at the end of UX Evening. It's 7 p.m., 7:09 p.m. So thank you all for staying 9 minutes past as well. Thank you so much to our fantastic panel, Anna, Jane, Stacy. Feel free to reach out. I'm just saying this, but feel free to reach out to anyone on the panel if you've got questions, if you just like to chat. Always just happy to share stuff, happy to chat content design. And also, before I go, thank you to our fantastic UX Evening team. Kostas has been feeding me questions on the side. Thank you, Suman, Julie, Bhavya, Sharon, Prashant, as well, for organizing this and doing such a fantastic job. And yeah, have a pleasant evening, everyone. Oh, wait, one last note before I go. If you enjoyed this, post about it, tag your host with UX Evening, no S. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Steph.
Thank you.